All right, so now we're going to get started.
Good morning, Annie.
Hi, Louisa. Hi, Karen.
Good morning.
Hello, hello. Okay, here I am, still technologically backwards. So let's start today with a little meditation. Okay. So we're studying a text, The Wheel of Sharp Weapons, which is covers really all of Buddhist thought, but with a particular emphasis on karma, right? This idea that actions have related results. And so that everything that we're experiencing is due to causes and conditions that we have created. And so, as part of meditating on the actions, the workings of karma, then it helps us identify um, and recognize the different varieties of discomfort, displeasure, and downright suffering that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And so, in order to help us overcome that suffering, then one of the ways in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition is to help us expand our concern. So moving away from just selfish concern, a concern just for ourselves, and being able to empathize with all of the living beings that we share our lives with. And so there are many, many different ways to meditate, of course, but one of the ways that is particularly effective is called the giving and taking meditation. So this is, again, a way of training our minds to be able to expand the scope of our concern and love and compassion and sense of responsibility, right? So changing the focus from just being concerned with our own selfish aims, and instead using every experience that we encounter and being able to generate that sense of closeness with others. So we'll do this for a few minutes. And so you just start by sitting comfortably and taking a few nice deep breaths. Completely relaxing. Allowing the mind to settle to the rhythm of the breathing. And then think that you're in a very safe environment, a very safe place. It gives you the foundation to be able to explore your own feelings and to open your heart to others. And so into this safe space, and we call to mind living beings for whom we feel close to, and really try to think of a particular person or a few people who you feel close to. Think of their faces, bring them to mind very vividly. And likewise, bring to mind people for whom you feel neither strong attachment nor strong aversion to. And then finally, bring to mind someone for whom you might feel a sense of distance, dislike, or aversion. So with this Tonglen meditation, this giving and taking meditation, whenever we're experiencing any kind of discomfort or anxiety, any kind of suffering, then we use this to empathize with others. And so as we do this, you can think to your mind of a specific problem that you might be having, or just a general sense of suffering. And then think that each of these people, each of these living beings who we've collected together in our meditation just now, think that each of these beings is also experiencing a very similar type of discomfort. And through our sense of connection with them, and we think how wonderful it would be if we could take on all of their suffering, if we could relieve each living being of this suffering. And so we inhale, and on this inhalation, we imagine, visualize that we're taking on all of their suffering in the form of black light or black smoke or dark smoky substance, whatever feels comfortable to you. But think that on the inhalation that enters you through your nostrils in the form of that black smoky substance, relieving them instantaneously of all of their discomfort. All of that negativity then enters you, and then it strikes your heart center. And what's at your heart center? That sense of self-cherishing, that egocentric clinging. And because you're taking on the suffering of others with a pure intention, then that's the antidote for that kind of self-cherishing. And so it cracks it open and gives rise to pure love and compassion, which then exits your body. On the exhalation, you're sending back all of that liberated love and compassion. And so all of that pure white light then enters the bodies of all of those living beings, filling them from head to toe with that purity. So you could do this for a specific kind of suffering, like maybe hunger or thirst, or a feeling of insecurity, whatever it might be. But because it's a sensation that's very real for you at the moment, then you can think very clearly that all other beings are similarly experiencing that type of suffering. How wonderful it would be to be able to relieve them of that suffering. And so again, on the inhalation, you bring all of that suffering into you in the form of a black, smoky substance or whatever is comfortable for you. And that cracks open that tight feeling of self-cherishing at the heart, thus releasing an outpouring of pure love and compassion. And that love and compassion then enters the living beings surrounding you, filling them with pure light, relieving them of all of their suffering. Okay. Are there any questions about the meditation? Okay. Then we will turn our attention back to the verses. So we are on verse 52 in the text. And I'm going to read the text, but I will try to put it on the share screen. Huh. See. Share. Whoa. I hope you guys can see it. Can you see the text?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
53 and 54.
Oh, great. Okay. Huh. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. It's kind of weird. It doesn't really show on the screen anymore. Okay. So let's see. So 52 is, I'll read 52, and we're going to go through 52, 53, and wow, hopefully all the way through 55. We're like zipping through this. Okay, 52 was hum hum, great meditation deity, display your miraculous powers. Za za, bind this enemy tightly. Pei pei, release us from all bondage. Shik shik, I beseech you to cut the knot of grasping. So this is a appeal to Yamantaka. This was a continuation of the previous verses. And the main point of the verse is to appeal to Yamantaka to untie or cut through the knots of self-grasping and self-cherishing. Right? 53, we're going to go through these two quickly. 53 is, appear before me, O Yamantaka, my meditation deity. Tear it, rip to shreds this very instant the leather sack of karma and the 5 poisonous afflictions that mire me in karma's samsaric mud. So here the main point of the verse again is to overcome the source of the negative emotions, which is that sense of self-grasping and self-cherishing. And those are the negative habits of mind that cause us to be reborn or over and over again in samsara. Samsara being cyclic existence, the current state of, actually I shouldn't say that sense of all pervasive suffering, the state of existence that is characterized as being all pervasive suffering. So some people say that, Buddhism is like the no good news way of thinking, right? They think, oh, Buddhism is like such a downer, and all it already talks about is suffering, no good news. This is actually a comment by Siling Tongpa Rinpoche from he was giving a short teaching at the Medicine Buddha teachings, last weekend in New York City, and so he brought up this point, and he said, no, that's not true, because Buddhism, you should think of it as being good news, because there's a way out of suffering, right? If the Buddha only taught about, suffering and all of the many different kinds of causes of suffering, right? Then you could say that Buddhism is bad, all bad news. But the point is that actually Buddha just diagnosed the situation that we're in, right? He's the skilled physician. And by pointing out the difficulties, the hardships, the sufferings of cyclic existence, that was just the starting point for then teaching us the path to freedom from suffering, right? So it's actually all good news. So anyway, okay. Right, so moving on to 54. Even though he leads me to misery, sorry, page just jumped. Even though he leads me to misery in the 3 lower realms, I do not learn to fear him, but rush to his source, dance and trample on the head of this betrayer false conception, mortally strike at the heart of this butcher and enemy ego. All right, so for this verse, so false conception refers to ego in this verse, right? And so ego, well, it's translated as ego here, or it's that sense of self, like a sense of having a permanent self, that feeling of self-grasping and self-cherishing, mistaking that as being the source of our happiness, when actually, as this verse clearly explains, this is the butcher and the enemy that steals and robs us of our happiness. So does anyone want to explain what we should probably touch on this topic of self-grasping and self-cherishing just a little bit more to make sure everybody understands it clearly. So what's self-grasping? We've talked about this, in the past, but always good to talk about it again. Does anybody want to?
I would just like to say it's a really important topic, and sometimes we had a conversation with Geshe Darge, I guess it was Thursday night, and some people think self-grasping is of self. You could have self-grasping of I, me, mine, but I think it's really important to recognize that self-grasping is more like what we're talking about on Tuesday nights, which is thinking something self-existent or inherently self-existent from its own side and grasping at that self-existence. It could be a phenomena, it could be a person's, it could be of ourself, right? So it's confusing. The word self in there is kind of confusing to some of us. You might want to elaborate more on that for us.
Well, I think that was a really good distinction, though, right?
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So we're talking about this self-grasping ignorance. So the ignorance that causes us to think that there is some kind of permanent sense of self, right? A sense of an enduring sense of me, myself, and I. And then and then what's self-cherishing then? Eric?
Believing yourself to be important and your needs are to be met, the desire to
Okay.
satiate your own desires.
Okay.
I'm important, more important than others.
Right. So that distinction between self and others, being wrapped up in your own selfish needs and that drive to satisfy those needs.
We would also include attachment to cyclical existence within the desire realm.
Well, self-cherishing would be,
Right?
well, as it pertains to yourself,
Yeah.
right? So it's always going back to the self. Yeah. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think worth noting is that you use the word, egocentric, or sometimes that word is mistaken. In a Freudian sense, it's very important to have a healthy ego, that which
Sure.
mediates between, superego and id, right? But in this sense, we're talking about this ego sense of self. And whoever the last person was, I can't see you guys, but mentioned that it's like when you cherish, you could cherish others or you could cherish yourself. If you put higher priority over self, that becomes egocentric, or cherishing self above cherishing others,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the irrational thought that you're the most important person in the room, or to you, you are, so I think that's interesting too. You might want to talk a little more on that. I find that confusing sometimes and interesting.
Yeah.
It's confusing.
Why is it
It
confusing?
can be confusing because, I was thinking it's not two, sometimes it's not two separate things.
Self
Like
and
the
others?
attachment and being in cyclical existence and being in the desire realm, it kind of includes that ego or the ids, psychology. Because then you're talking about heaps. Like aren't you talking about bringing in heaps? At that point?
I lost you.
Like when you're talking about like the attachment, like
Uh-huh.
then you're also like you want to like discuss like heaps in that, the 5 heaps.
As being the basis for the self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that
So
gets a
attachment
little
to
bit
the self.
intense.
Okay.
Yeah, and it gets into primary mind and all that. But the interesting thing of self and other is that it's the I-thou relationship, I think we call it sometimes, or the self is agentive and the other is objective, and seeing that as two separate things, the object separated from the self is not, that's how our mind perceives it. And that's where we get into the interesting point of self and self-existence, self-ego, right? Cherishing comes out of that, but it's not the first thing. It's like, it's because of that we have these sort of dependent arisings,
That the tension between self and others, from that sense of duality.
Yeah, an agent of an object, subject object, that duality, which is a false duality in the higher ultimate sense, but in the ordinary conventional sense, we sort of live it all the time. And that's what I mean when I find it confusing, because on one hand, I want a healthy ego that mediates between the superego and the id. But on the other hand, I want to see the dysfunctional, I guess, bias towards seeing myself as agent and you as object as separate.
Right.
And not understanding how my mind is creating that as a construct, but in fact, everything is in mind, and that they are, that's where it gets confusing, I say.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Right. And then, okay, so I think we can come back to that as we continue the conversation. Because the next point, I think this is a segue. The next point I was going to make was that how do we overcome self-grasping and self-cherishing? It's through compassion, right? Right. Because as the verse continues, it says, dance and trample, right? Dance and trample on the head of this betrayer of false conception. And who's doing the dancing and trampling? That's our bodhicitta, right? So through bodhicitta, through that mind of enlightenment, that sense of responsibility, love, and compassion for others, breaking through that duality of self and others, then that's what enables us to destroy the unhealthy sense of the false sense of ego, okay? With the butcher being self-cherishing in this verse and the enemy being self-grasping, striking the heart of the ultimate misconception of self-grasping and self-cherishing, right? So self-grasping and self-cherishing can be difficult to recognize, or that sense of, just in a general sense, that sense of ego, right, can be hard to recognize. And so, I think studies have shown that people who use a lot of self-referential terms in their communication, if you're writing something, or when we tend to use a lot of I like this, or I don't like this, or me, myself, I, when that is used very liberally in our communication, whether it's spoken or written, then that's an indication that we might be being under the control of strong self-cherishing. Where are we on time? Don't look at that clock. Well, it says 11:30. Okay, here, 10:30. And so anyway, I found this, has anyone heard of this podcast called My Unsung Hero?
Mhm.
That's a really nice
Yeah.
podcast.
It's beautiful.
So it's just very short, like 5-minute or less vignettes or anecdotes from people's lives. Anybody can contribute. And they're short stories about people's connections with somebody who was an unsung hero, to them. And I think, what I've found very striking about this is a lot of the stories illustrate the deep need that we have for a sense of recognition, right? A sense of that really beautiful human connection that we all share, at a very profound level. So even that sense of feeling that I matter, that I'm valued, that that sense of self-worth, that recognition from complete strangers in most cases, from the stories that I was listening to. Having somebody say, I love you, really makes us, feel good about ourselves. Can be very, very important to helping us rescue ourselves from ourselves, And so there was a story of somebody who was, a man he told about, he explained how he was in a very deep, dark depression. And he was walking down the street in a crowded city, and he was it was like a rush hour, and he was on the edge of the sidewalk, and a bus came by, and he could feel the bus, almost as though it was, going to touch his coat. And he was so depressed, he thought, the next time the bus comes, if I just lean over just a tiny bit more, then the bus will hit me, and I'll be, free from all of this suffering. But just at the moment that he was having those, essentially suicidal thoughts, he just happened to look up into the crowd, and he saw a woman walking in his direction, a beautiful young lady, who just happened to look at him with such sincere compassion, such sincere, just with a beautiful, beautiful smile. And he really felt a sense of connection with her. And then his mood just changed, and then it was just gone. He was like, okay. It was so beautiful. And so, it made so much of a difference in his life that, a few years later, there he is, doing a My Unsung Hero podcast about that one moment. So I thought that was neat. So it's definitely worth a listen. Some very, very beautiful stories about human connection and the need for, being open to helping others. So in a few classes, a few weeks ago, we did a class and we talked about random acts of kindness. Right? So this is kind of very much along the same lines, right? You can be an unsung hero to somebody without realizing that you're being the unsung hero. It's totally unintentional. It can make a tremendous difference in other people's lives. It comes back to that theme of how, it really doesn't take too much for us to be happy. It doesn't really take a whole lot to make somebody happy. And so going back to this sort of maybe some of the more subtle ways in which our mind, that sense of self-cherishing, is always fooling us, is always dragging us around, right? And so you think of all of, our insecurities that we have, right? Self-cherishing, somebody who's self-cherishing, like, myself, right? I don't want to feel insecure, right? But I have many insecurities. Suffering, of course, is like a general term that includes feeling insecure, feeling vulnerable in so many different ways. So, like we could feel insecure about, like, maybe you really want to be the best kazoo player. You really want to be a good kazoo player. And so you're just waiting, but you feel like insecure. Am I a good kazoo player? Or maybe I'm not a good kazoo player. And you're just secretly hoping that sometime somebody would say, hey, you're a damn good kazoo player, right? And that would just like make you feel a whole lot better about yourself. And maybe it would be just what you need to continue playing the kazoo, right? Maybe you were about to give up the kazoo because you're like, I have no future in kazoo playing. So again, just, a silly example of, but there's so many different ways in which we're insecure, right? We're afraid of looking stupid. We're afraid of others thinking of us as being weak. Well, that's a big one, right? We're afraid of looking like we don't have any self-confidence, or that we're a pushover, or that we're unattractive, right? Oh, she's so ugly, or he's so ugly, or whatever it is, right? Especially as we get older, right? I was riding the subway in New York City just recently. I was going to go see my mom. And you're getting older when like everybody starts getting up and offering you their seat on the subway. Older people. I'm like, wait a minute. Dude, you're older than me. You're still offering the seat? Huh?
I started getting called ma'am.
Right.
Oh my God.
Oh boy. Younger people, okay, but somebody who's older with a cane and they're offering you their seat? I was like, shoot. Not that old. But anyway, okay. And so, when you start thinking of and identifying, really sitting down and thinking about our fears, our vulnerabilities, right? So it's obvious that we're very good prey for politicians, for advertisers, right? Because we have all these weak points. Okay. All right, so this is an open question, maybe something to reflect on for a few minutes. How do we think of ourselves? Do we take the time to stop and kind of assess our own relationship with ourselves? Not like in a narcissistic way or anything, but I think it is good. We're talking about mind training, right? Meditation and mind training is a way for us to, the buck stops here, right? Well, then you better understand what that means, right? When we're destroying or examining, with a scalpel, what does it mean to have self-grasping? What does it mean to have self-cherishing? So we have to start somewhere, right? And so, well, that would be kind of a personal question. So let's leave that as your homework, right? A good thing to just consider, to take a minute and just, ask yourself, is this something, do I put, like at the end of the day, before I'm going to bed, do I stop and I think about all of the things that I've done and, do the purification practices, right? Say sorry and mean it. And then, just examine the qualities of your mind. Examine it's a way of examining your spiritual progress too, right? But just see if how things are going. Check up, as Lama Geshe would say. Any comments before we head to the lower realms?
I just had, I'm thinking about what Richard was saying about the superego and the id and the ego and self-cherishing and self-grasping. One of the things that they have in psychology that might be useful, because it's sort of a secular way of thinking about mindfulness, is this idea of an observing ego. So what is an observing ego? An observing ego is almost as though you are, you sort of step back from yourself and watch almost as though there's a movie playing out. And the beauty of that can be that you're separated from hindrances, and you're able to sort of look, oh, how is this entity interacting with other entities? And can I think about it in a compassionate way to treat other entities so that you're not so encumbered by your id and your ego and your super ego. You really sort of have a certain degree of
A little distance, maybe?
objectiveness. Yes.
My question for you is, where is the separation before going disassociative?
Oh, you have to be
Right.
grounded to do that. No, this is not a dissociative.
That's not
exercise.
dissociative,
Not at all.
and it has to be clarified, because some people can, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but this is actually,
Mistakenly, like, take that disassociation and think it's that.
no, it's not
You know what I'm saying?
dissociation at all. Yeah, no. This is, you're absolutely grounded and
Right.
observing.
Right.
Good point, thank you.
All right.
Annie, I'm sorry. Yvonne has such a soft voice. I can't really hear any of this.
Oh, sorry, Louisa.
It's okay.
I'm just talking about an observing ego as sort of a way to encourage, another way to think about mindfulness and think about that. How do you conquer what Richard was saying earlier about the superego, the id, and the ego, and to not get wrapped up in the perils of that, as it refers to the verses.
And Yvonne gave the example, as with mindfulness practice, as being able to kind of step back a little bit and observe, the way in which we're reacting with others and maybe also with ourselves, almost as though you're watching a movie, and being able to observe what's going on with a little bit, maybe less emotional investment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way of thinking. Yeah. So we can apply that when we're doing our homework, which is to think of our the way in which we do carry out some form of self-reflection. That's a good technique. Great. Okay. So the verse also mentioned, right? The first sentence is, da, 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 even though he leads me to misery in the 3 lower realms. So the 3 lower realms are the hell realms, the hungry ghosts, and the animal realms. And so, even if we don't see it, that we tend not to believe it, right? If you don't see it, you don't believe it. And so understanding or even conceiving that such realms of existence, are possible, is very new to us as Westerners. But the point of doing so, meditating on the sufferings that, of each of these realms, which is very, very extensively described in the teachings, is in order to help us generate a very strong, powerful sense of renunciation. And so, I'll read the reasons for meditating on the sufferings of each of those realms without giving the full explanation of the sufferings of each of those realms, because you can do that on your own. But this is helpful, I think, to make the connection between our negative emotions and birth in each of these realms. So I'm reading from Parting from the Four Attachments by Chögyal Chichen Rinpoche, who's one of the Sakya masters. It's a commentary on Jetsun Drakpa Gyaltsen's Song of Experience of Mind Training and the View. So he says, how can we turn away from the causes that lead to birth in these realms? Since birth in the hells is a direct result of anger, then whenever you are in danger of giving rise to anger, remember vividly and immediately that this is a cause that will propel you into rebirth in the hell realms. When stingy and miserly reaction arises in you, remember well that indulging in these emotions creates the causes that propel you into existence as a hungry ghost. When dullness, doubt, and confusion muddle your mind, remember that this produces causes that drive you toward rebirth among the animals. In this way, you practice a very important aspect of remembering and mindfulness.
Can you read the cause of the rebirth in animal realm, please?
It says, when dullness, doubt, and confusion muddle your mind. Kind of insulting to animals.
We've talked a lot about the animal realm dilemma before, right? You and I. Seems like a desirable realm to me. Until we get deeper.
Yep. Okay, so even without, as we come to these teachings, if we're new to the teachings, then you might think, well, I don't really have to worry about that, or it doesn't, sink in with me because I don't believe in the existence of the other realms of existence. I don't believe in karma. I don't believe in past and future lives, right? But even so, I think if you're open to entertaining those ways of thinking, then that can give rise to even a very limited sense of renunciation, right? And just identifying, recognizing those kinds of feelings and the frequency with which they arise, right? So we experience anger, miserliness. We might feel, dull-minded. I certainly do, quite often. And we can recognize that those feelings, give rise to a sense of suffering, right? And so when we deeply meditate on the sufferings of the human and animal realms, right, we can recognize the sufferings of the animals, then that's already, very frightening. That's bad enough, right? Even if we don't believe in the hell realms, which is where the suffering is even more intense, or the hungry ghosts. Even if we just start with recognizing and really, really fully coming to terms or empathizing with the sufferings of the human and animal realms, then we can use that, as part of our transformation. Right? So we meditate over and over again on such suffering until, and with the goal of being able to feel a shift in the way we think, in the way we experience things. And hopefully, with the goal again of developing a pure renunciation. Renunciation meaning giving up attachment to this life, to everything associated with this life. Every form of attachment for this life is then recognized as being something that we need to get rid of. And so the way in which we should think of our worldly existence, of just a couple of examples. So these are kind of interesting. If you visit a particularly unpleasant place, you will not wish to return there again under any circumstances. If you have this type of attitude towards samsara, it's a sign of renunciation. Another example of an appropriate attitude towards samsara is that of birds, of the varieties that are unable to land on water.
Wait, what?
They're unable to land on water. Like, so a cardinal isn't gonna go fly into a lake and try to land on the lake.
Okay.
But a goose might, but not a sparrow. They would drown, right? So they would never even consider landing there. This is exactly how we should renounce samsara, so that we're determined that there's no way we're going to land there, no matter what, because we know we would drown immediately. And then one last one is another example that's quite appropriate is that if someone showed you a pile of excrement, you wouldn't be suddenly attracted to go pick it up and play with it. This is Buddhist humor. If we are to develop renunciation with this sense of revulsion for worldly existence, then we're moving in the right direction. All right. Okay. What the time ends at 11:30? Yes. Okay. So we still have a little bit of time. So verse 55, any other comments on 54, or can I keep going to 55?
Would this be a good time to go back to the one 52? Because I was hoping someone would explain the meanings of hom, za, pit, and chic. Even though I think I don't know them, I might know one or two of them. But would you like to clarify what those mean? The hom, za, za, pit, chic, chic.
No, not really, not especially not in this context. So
Okay.
keep going on that because Geshe-la kind of told me not to go into the whole Yamataka thing. So
Aha. Okay. Thanks.
I'm going to pass on that. Okay. Anything else on 54? Okay. So let's just keep going here. 55. Though my desire for comfort is great, I do not gather its causes. Though I have little endurance for pain, I am rife with the dark craving of greed. Dance and trample on the head of this betrayer false conception, mortally strike at the heart of this butcher and enemy ego. So the main point that this verse is making is that we want comfort and happiness. Like raise your hand if you don't want comfort and happiness, right? But we don't accumulate the causes for comfort and happiness. We do exactly the opposite. And that's, sort of the tragedy of the way in which, we ordinarily live our lives, right? And so instead, we're fooled into thinking that happiness and all the comforts of life, of worldly existence, right? We think that those come from external sources, right? We think that the true cause for our happiness has to be out there somewhere. Not realizing that actually the causes are lie within. So it's a question of changing our attitude, our perception, the way in which we think, more so than trying to accumulate, more stuff, a bigger car, a bigger house, a good reputation, etc. Right? And so we might think that having, a beautiful body, looking very attractive, we might think that that's, really the result of expensive plastic surgery, right? Liposuction and all kinds of funny things like that. But actually, physical beauty, the teachings explain that that's the result of karmic causes and conditions, right? It's the result of practicing generosity and patience and all of those good things. And it's something that we can lose very quickly, right? So you could be very, very beautiful. You could be a beautiful actor or actress or whatever, right? And then the minute, you get angry, then what happens? When you get very, very angry, then that beauty vanishes. You look like a really, like any scary person. And so I was in a restaurant and I overheard a conversation just the other day, and the people were talking about all the things that we ordinarily think of as happiness, right? They were talking about work and romance and going on great vacations and eating good food at restaurants and redecorating their homes, and of course the economy, right? And they were just saying that, in fact, one woman actually said it. She said, life is short, I just want to have fun. And that's what everybody thinks, right? We always think the same way. Life is short, we just want to have fun. And so maybe as a discussion question, how about the economy? How about inflation? How is this affecting the way in which we live, right? How has that, kind of been a good challenge for our practice? Right? All of a sudden you go to the grocery store, you can't afford to buy anything, right? You can't heat your house, you can't put gas on the car.
I mean, I don't think it's that extreme. You might want to just buy more pasta and vegetables and meat. I mean, most people in our,
Try to be flexible and
would we rather go to war with Russia?
no, of course not.
Well, then we have to put up with a little discomfort. that's
Okay.
Coming from that, that's all I look at it.
Okay, making some sacrifices then.
Yeah, I think probably, and I'm not sure, but we are all so lucky. And every day, twice a day, I start and finish my day with a prayer that starts with, as I pass through life after life in some sorrow, whatever suffering I experience, may it not be characterized by my not understanding that it is the same for all beings. Whatever happiness I experience through worldly successes, and make use of it in common with all beings to bring about greater understanding. What that reminds me every morning and every night is that I can buy food and I am heating my house. And that allows me the opportunity to improve myself and help other people. And no matter how bad you have it, you still have that opportunity. Even if I were to lose half of everything I have, I would still be better off than 90% of this world. And that has turned from fear of losing it 3 years ago, which was a huge part of my living anxiety, just loss of anything, to the ease and the appreciation of counting it as all benefit and not burden, and not coveting it, but appreciating it and being so thankful for it.
Yeah.
I forgot the question.
Oh, the question was, how is inflation affecting you?
Inflation?
Not to get too political with it either, but inflation is one thing, but corporate greed is another. And we're not seeing entirely true inflation, but we do have companies and entities making more money than they've ever made and still charging more. So there is an injustice that is occurring that's hard to just say, well, yeah, 3% a year, and this is a 1 year.
Right.
There are still people making out like bandits on us.
Yeah.
And those are the people that I think of when I have to think of people that I have aversion for and still
Good point.
want to alleviate their suffering, despite the fact that they're overwhelmed with greed that affects everyone around them.
Good points.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that because I think that's a great point. And I agree with you, Annie. And it's sometimes interesting, like as Buddhists, we're often told being a Buddhist does not mean being a doormat. It does not mean you don't stand up for what you think would be a better justice or an improved world and try to make changes. To that last speaker's point, we could do that in a compassionate way. So without getting angry at the corrupt politicians or corporation leaders who are, in our view, acting quite unfairly to others and harming others, maybe, rather than vilifying them completely. Maybe the Buddhist path would be something a little different, with compassion, having perhaps an angry starting point, but with compassion turning that, but still not losing our ability to wish to change the planet and the world, the universe, for the benefit of all born beings somehow. So I'd love to hear the last speaker sort of comment a little more on that. That was a great idea, I think.
Well, Geshe said wrathfulness is not anger.
Mm-hmm.
Passionate fighting against injustice for the sake of all beings is a wrathful behavior, and that level of emotion is welcome. I think in this level of tempered emotion is a goal, but effort, mindful effort to help other people who are being abused
Yeah.
or suffering
Forceful.
can be passionate
Yeah.
without being wrapped up in self, and passionate for others.
Right, pure intention.
Yeah, yeah. And so what you're teaching us, Annie, right now with this verse is like without this self-cherishing, without the self-cherishing desire for comfort from the wrong sources, we're capable of letting go of our anger when we feel an injustice or a deep sense of what's the word? Self-cherishing, a deep sense of indignation that this is somehow aimed at us personally and viewing ourselves as the most important person in the universe. If we can let go of that, we're maybe more capable of what the speaker's talking about. I just think this is really important. This is really interesting.
Good
Can I
point.
chime in too?
Well, Yvonne has been very patient.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll wait. I
Back to
couldn't
you,
see.
Louisa. I won't forget.
I just wanted to share something. I was working with someone who was quite wealthy, made quite a bit of money, whatever, and they weren't understanding about helping others. And I was talking to Lauren, and I said, I feel like this person is in the God realm. And he said, yes, he's in the God realm. And I said, and it's so interesting that there was no sort of understanding of others around me. I said, yes, that's one of the characteristics of the God realm. And that's how you can have compassion for these corporations and whatever, because they're kind of in the God realm. And I think of it that way.
Okay.
You can have compassion arise. And I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it.
That's cute.
Okay. Huh. All right. So Amazon and all the rest, Elon Musk, or whatever his name is, right? All in the God realms. Be compassionate, understanding the sufferings of the God realms, that extreme self-centeredness. The heck with the rest of the world. Louisa.
It wasn't me, Annie. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, who else was trying to speak? Somebody else?
Brie, it's Brie, but did
Oh, hi.
Louisa get to speak? Hi, well, hi everyone. Did she get a chance to speak? I just can't see anyone right now,
Yeah.
but I'm listening.
I'm going to do the stop share then.
I hadn't raised my hand, so it's quite all right.
Okay, I just wanted to chime in on your original question of the inflation. My immediate thought went to, I've noticed some changes as well, in kind of a different direction of a building of a sense of community and sharing is what I've experienced just in my neighborhood. We've always been that way, but inwardly myself, I'm finding myself trying to find more ways to be non-dependent upon all these big corporations. Like for example, bringing in things from the outside instead of letting them overwinter, like chamomile. So I'll just keep propagating chamomile and making my own tea, for example. Anything I can do, or freezing or canning, stuff like that, that I'm, I do with neighbors, we do it together. So that has been a cool little thing that has increased since the pandemic and the inflation and all that. So that's been nice. And of course, the time together, the understanding, all of that comes with it, the sense of community and yeah, looking out for each other, compassion.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, before I forget, we do have a holiday food and clothing drive going on. So there's a box over there for donations, and if you come sometime, any other time, you could just drop off your donations by the front door, maybe in like a plastic bag or something weatherproof. If no one's here, if somebody's here, then you can knock on the door, of course, and just bring it inside. So we're collecting through December 20th. A neighbor of mine is taking clothes to Harlem on Thanksgiving morning. She says she's been doing this for 7 years, and so she asked me if I had anything to donate so that she could take it.
I think
So yeah, just bring it by, and we'll take whatever we've got.
What was that date is that she's bringing it, Anila?
Thanksgiving morning. So if you can
Okay.
bring it a little bit before, then
Okay,
that would help her.
that's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
But we'll also collect through Christmas as well, right?
Yes, definitely. Yep.
Or the holidays.
Yeah, so we have a little more time. Okay, so I think this is a good segue to talk about ethics, right? I mean, Geshe Darge is always talking about morality and ethics being the foundation of the path. And so ethics, maybe simply defined, are the guidelines that help us self-regulate, maybe control our own minds and associated behavior, right? And so those are the agreed upon, like cultural or societal ways of engaging with others, right? Of course, they're in just within the Buddhist, tradition. Then there are all of the precepts and vows that we can take. But I'm not going to get into that right now, since this is a secular class. So we strive to live in an ethical way so as to respect others, respect ourselves, and we put ethics into practice, through this sense of self-discipline. And associated with self-discipline are mindfulness and introspection, and that ability to stop and check in, from time to time to see how we're doing. And so the teachings on morality and the practice of the 10 non-virtuous deeds, as antidotes, or as in distinction or in opposition to the 10 non-virtuous deeds, right? So we've got non-virtuous deeds and virtuous deeds. Understanding that relationship, that pairing, is very important. And the reason why ethics is so important is beautifully stated here. Says, the genuine practice of ethics offers a solace that actually pacifies and cools down one's being, making it possible to relinquish whatever sufferings may torment us. Ethical discipline acts to soothe our suffering and gives us a strength of faith, devotion, and self-discipline that otherwise would be lacking. This is why it is so essential to persevere in the practice of ethics. Okay. So ethics and virtue are the antidotes for all the miseries and dissatisfaction and suffering that we encounter in this life. And so, when I was thinking about ethics and the way it, plays out in our relationships with others. And so, one way, when we talk about mistaken view, right? When we talk about biases or negative stereotyping, right? So so when we were going back to animals, so, a lot of people still believe that animals are stupid and that they don't have feelings, that they're incapable of communicating, particularly when it comes to farm animals, right? A lot of people think that cows are stupid, the pigs are stupid, the chickens are stupid, that they don't mind being stuck in little crates. Cows don't mind, female cows, the dairy cows don't mind having their babies taken away from them at birth. which is kind of shocking that people still believe that. Some people think that, actually until very recently, people thought that scientists, biologists thought that many animals are mute, right? They didn't believe that like tortoises and snakes and, some lizards actually have forms of communicating that, hey, guess what? We just can't hear it. And so the point being that, this is a rationale for, it's a justification for us to slaughter them for food and, other animal products. We don't hesitate to use them in laboratory testing because we think, well, they're just stupid and they can't speak anyway, so whatever, right? They're disposable. And so we eat them. And so, it's a little bit similar to the stereotypes of that we slap on top of people, right? And so there's the stereotype of the evil Asian, like right now, as I've said previously, people think that Asian people are smart. So right now, that's pretty good, right? But that wasn't always the case, right? The Asian people were vilified. There were laws enacted to keep Asian people out of the United States, et cetera, and Canada. The evil Jewish person, the evil Jew, right? American Indians or blacks. All of those stereotypes dehumanize people of color. And so, that dehumanization carries out even to how, we see, in this case, I'm talking about women, right? And so you think at the very extreme level of women being, abused, not just women, but young women or even young girls, right? And there are a lot of famous cases just recently, like there was Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, his accomplice. There was Harvey Weinstein, and many other examples of sexual predators. And so it just shows that the crazy extent to which people will act out of their desire, out of their selfish, interests, totally dehumanizing, not caring at all about their victims, right? It's hard to understand what people think about, in that situation of power and control. Just awful. And then there are other people who would, without hesitation, blame somebody else, pin the blame for something on somebody else. So the other person gets in trouble, the other person goes to prison, but they get off scot-free. There are people who go trophy hunting and they kill endangered species because they want the honor of killing, the last, whatever it is. Yeah. So even if we don't believe in karma, we believe in the criminal justice system, right? And so there is some sense of like, oh my God, thank goodness that, these people are being locked up. Harvey Weinstein is serving a 23-year prison term in New York and is currently on trial in Los Angeles and faces up to 140 years in prison for his crimes. Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide in a jail in Manhattan, and his accomplice is in prison for 20 years. All right. So in the end, though, you can think, well, the karma is going to catch up for them. And that's why the hell realms are so crowded. You won't get away with it. All right, so I just wanted to close a little bit with, let's see if I can do this. I should really just shut up. Maybe I'll just stop. Do we want to do just like a general question and answer for a while here? And I'll leave this.
I would love to jump in on what something you did say, which is so shocking to me. My grandfather, well, his mother was half Ojibwe Indian,
Oh,
and he was involved with a lot of stuff in the wilderness. And so a lot of hunters from Europe came, and some of them reported that they were actually in the 1900s, like 1901, hunting Beothuk Indians in Newfoundland, Canada. That was their prey. They didn't consider them humans. So I just add that to your list of shocking ideas about how we have these biases and unfair things. And of course, that's as bad as hunting animals, maybe worse because these are humans. And I just like to say he felt so sorry for those Spanish people because who were coming to hunt. And I think, you know, some of us can feel the same way for the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, just like have extreme empathy for the karma that they're generating for themselves, as well as empathy for their victims. And
Exactly.
yeah, I'm going to shut up. But
No, that's perfect.
thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Thank you for your observations. Yeah. And that's exactly the point. So I'm glad you brought that up. The fact that here we're growing compassion, not just for the victims, but definitely for the craziness, you know, so really totally being under the control of the negative emotions, whatever drives people to be sexual predators, right? Man, you know, to totally. And so that brings up the point of, you know, being careful to distinguish between judging the actions versus judging, you know, the person being totally under the control of the negative emotions of self-cherishing, self-grasping, and then all of the associated attachment and anger, etc. Yeah, thank you. Eric.
I was listening to a Dharma talk a time ago that really stuck with me, that put forth the idea that all of the bigotry and superiority complexes that exist start with the desensitization to animals at a young age. In other words, when you start teaching children right away that we kill and eat the chickens, but we love and care for the cats. And we don't care about the insects, we kill every spider, but we go to the zoo and we pay to see the elephants. That this literally sets, perfect, as early as a person can understand anything, the separation. I can choose what's important and what's not. What living things, we just divide them up.
Right.
Kill them, they don't matter. I spend $20,000 on a surgery for my dog. This disparity then becomes the same with humans. You see other things as a hierarchy that's almost arbitrary, because our animal hierarchy is completely arbitrary.
Yeah.
So you see people who aren't like you, and they're not as good as you, because the animals that aren't like you aren't as good as you, because you've been taught that.
Right.
So imagine if you taught children to love every spider like they love every hamster and every creepy crawly that they, and dogs and everything, predators, the same, that the level of discrimination about other people really wouldn't exist. It would be such a foreign, you'd be 3 steps past
right
practice. You have to really stretch it to be like, you know, I love this frog, but you know, that person's the wrong color. Like that couldn't.
You're off to a better start at least. Yeah.
So it's
that's a
right
good
off
point.
the bat with the
Yeah.
first pureed chicken that goes in their mouth. It's like, and they just think it's okay
First
because
food, baby
why
food.
wouldn't they? They've been taught that, and it's really sad.
That's a good
in my
point.
mind that,
Yeah.
you know, and I never thought of that until I heard Alana speak on it.
Yeah. No, it's
Really
something
great
you really
point.
take for granted, right? I mean, you just.
So ingrained.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good
Of
point.
course, the people,
Right. And I think for some kids, you know, it's just more even starting with the young children, some of them, for whatever reason, maybe karmic, they have a stronger sense of protection and closeness with animals.
right.
Like there was this kid, so I have a son, and when he was young, he was like maybe 5 or 6. I don't remember exactly how old he was, but one of his classmates, it wasn't him, it was one of his classmates, he'd be out there defending every spider in the classroom, and that rubbed off on my son. But You know, and the other kids are like, kill it, because they were scared. There was kind of like a natural scariness about spiders. But,
they're just imitating their parents.
But yeah,
The
yeah, they
parents
got
say
it from
kill, so they
somewhere.
say kill.
Right, right. And he'd be out there, no, he'd be like diving over the spider.
Oh,
So I guess, yeah, maybe his parents did the same thing. Yeah, yeah, he was a sweet boy. I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
Stina.
Stina?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Stina.
I think it comes more from inner insecurity and then fear of the other.
Inner
Mostly
insecurity,
if
okay.
If you don't know a group or know a certain person,
Uh-huh,
that's when you fear your grasping comes in, you think they're gonna take something away from you that you have. And in that spider's case, maybe it's a bite on your leg or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
I don't think it has to do with, so I'm not a llama, but, I mean, off the top, I don't think sure, that could condition you, but I think it's more just an innate, that's why throughout history, human beings always find someone to other, someone to fear,
Uh-huh,
because it either makes them feel better, or they think the immigrants are gonna take away,
right,
you know,
right.
some of our health care, when
Right.
instead corporate, you know, whatever entities are taking away things 100-fold more than any immigrant who's just working their butt off.
Right,
But it's always fear and
Yeah.
self-cherishing for
Yeah.
losing something.
yeah, yeah. Good point.
I just want to say something, I agree with you, because I feel it's a disconnect with nature. So many people don't realize, like, just the fact, the beauty of it, and the plants. When you think of herbalism, there's a plant for everything that can heal us.
Yeah,
And people have forgotten what it's like. And you look at the studies in Japan with forest bathing. Blood pressure goes down, the depression goes away.
Huh.
Take a walk in the woods. It's like there's this really simple message. And when you have kids, little kids, that they're outside and you're in nature with them, I think it just makes such a big difference. And there's just a disconnect with everything. So I'm always outside. I just read an interesting study that they found bees. I'm amazed with bees because I garden.
yeah.
They go through a thing where there is a playfulness in a little bee. They do play.
Oh,
So if we think of that, like, yeah, animals, yes, they are smart, they have feelings. But I think when I see people in the forest sometimes with their phones,
right.
I think there's a real big, yes, technology has a place, but I think it also is causing so many problems.
Yeah, that distraction. Although I'm using it to identify plants on my
It
phone.
does have a place, but it does have a place.
I'm kidding,
Things
yeah.
you can find out and all, but I think sometimes, when people are just, when you're driving and they're on their phone, driving,
Right,
almost
that's
hitting
scary.
it to you, it's like, just be present, put it
Absolutely.
down, especially when you're outside.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, or they're walking their dog and they were on the phone, that's terrible.
'Cause we
Yeah,
have-
or they're with their kids. Even
Yeah.
worse, you're with their kids and you're on the phone and the kid is like, ooh, that's terrible.
Tugging at the mom.
Yeah.
You have to be the model too. Exactly.
Absolutely.
You have to, if you say don't do that, you have to do it as well. But the healing power of nature. I think
Yeah.
people have forgotten about that.
Yeah.
It's maybe because, I've come to feel this more since I started studying and practicing Buddhism, is that every being is the same being, born under different conditions. That's it. I'm you, you're me. We just born to a different family, and that changes everything from the first minute. But this spark of life that really just becomes blown in the wind to differentiate between all of us. That when you're in nature and when you start to understand it, you feel like you're part of it, instead of this, I'm separate, I gotta protect, I gotta be aggressive, I have to push away, because it's all the same. People that used to aggravate me now, I just see myself aggravated. I see myself when I'm in their state.
Right.
That's me.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling that.
Perfect,
way.
yeah.
It doesn't matter what the skin is. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just we're in different physical forms, which is an illusion, and it goes on and on. But I don't know.
That's really good. That's really helpful.
The natural part to me, that's just the clincher. I just wasn't born a frog. In karma side, you can just say it's that simple. If I wasn't born to my parents, you know, that frog would have a different life.
Right.
The incident is almost random. Again, karma's not.
Okay, very good, very helpful, good discussion. I hope you guys can hear online. I know it's a little hard to,
Yes, it's audible.
pretty good, okay, thank you. Anything else from anybody online? No? All right, then I want to close with some verses because the election is coming up. I was going to talk about karma and social justice, but we'll do that next class. Dedication of merit. Some verses from the Guardian is Precious Garland, because the election's coming up, and this is his advice to the king. So we're hoping that everybody who's politically involved is listening. And so we dedicate all of the merit from our efforts to better understand ourselves and others on our path to enlightenment. And hoping that the world becomes a better place on November 8th. So his comments on generosity. These verses are just so beautiful. This is what the advice is for somebody who is in a position of power. So generosity, just as you are intent on thinking of what could be done to help yourself, so you should be intent on thinking of what could be done to help others. If only for a moment, make yourself available for the use of others, just as earth, water, fire, wind, medicine, and forests are available to all. And so there's some verses on how generosity calls for analysis of what will help contingent upon circumstances. So in other words, be wise. Even give poison to those whom it will help, but do not give even the best food to those whom it will not help. Just as it is said that it will help to cut off a finger bitten by a snake, so the subduer, meaning the Buddha, says that if it helps others, one should even bring temporary discomfort. Okay. Types of charitable assistance. So care for the disadvantaged. And I know in previous classes, a long time ago, I think, I read some of these verses because I picked up the book and there were all these stickies, which means that I've used this before. But anyway, always care compassionately for the sick, the unprotected, those stricken with suffering, the lowly and the poor, and take special care to nourish them. Provide extensive care for the persecuted, the victims of crop failure, the stricken, those suffering contagion, and for beings in conquered areas. Cause the blind, the sick, the lowly, the protectorless, the destitute, and the crippled equally to obtain food and drink without interruption. In order to alleviate the suffering of sentient beings, the old, young, and infirm, you should establish through the estates that you control doctors and barbers. I like the barbers throughout your country. And then for beggars, until you have given to monastics and beggars seasonally appropriate food and drink. I'll take some coffee. As well as produce, grain, and fruit, you should not partake of them. Lovingly give to beggars various and glittering, clothes, adornments, perfumes, garlands, and enjoyments. And then the care for prisoners. Just as deficient children are punished out of a wish to make them competent, so punishment should be carried out with compassion, not through hatred nor desire for wealth. Public education, as ways to increase wisdom, wherever there is a school in the land, provide for the livelihood of teachers and give lands to them for their provision. Oh wait, we gotta hear this one. Public parks and facilities for travelers. Oh, one of good wisdom, please provide hostels, parks, dikes, ponds, rest houses, water vessels, beds, food, hay, and wood. Please establish rest houses in all towns, at temples, and in all cities, and provide water vessels on all arid roadways. Now, this is really good. At the sites of the water vessels, I think that must be like public water fountains or something. I'm not sure. Place shoes, umbrellas, water filters, tweezers for removing thorns, needles, thread, and fans. Within vessels, place 3 medicinal fruits, the 3 fever medicines, butter, honey, eye medicines, and antidotes to poison, and write out mantras and prescriptions. At the sites of the vessels, place salves for the body, feet, and head, as well as wool, stools, gruel, jars for getting water, cooking pots, axes, and so forth. Please have small containers in the shade filled with sesame, rice, grains, food, molasses, and suitable water. He's so specific. It's amazing. He's so specific about what people need. And they need so little, like, no cell phones, no, just small, important things. All right. And then finally, care for animals and hungry ghosts. At the openings of ant hills, like ants, right? Ant hills. Please have trustworthy persons always put food, water, sugar, and piles of grain. So beautiful, right? What do we do for ants? We don't feed them, that's for sure. For other animals and hungry ghosts, this is the last verse. Before and after taking food, always appropriately offer fare, F-A-R-E, food, to hungry ghosts, dogs, ants, birds, and so forth. Okay, so before we eat, after we eat, we should be offering, at least mentally, offering food to the hungry ghosts and all forms of animals, living beings. All right, so we pray that all of that comes true, that we may have compassionate rulers, and that we may do our part to making sure that that happens. Okay, any last comments?
Thank you, Ani.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Stop the recording.